Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. It's your host, Kaylee here, and you are tuning in to episode 173. Today, we're going to be talking about some best practices for incentivizing employees, namely, please stop using incentives to motivate. Okay, let me explain what I mean by that. I'm getting ready to give a presentation on this topic at the Multi-Specialty Aesthetic Conference in San Diego next week. And I was just starting to put some notes together in preparation for this talk. And I normally talk a lot about comp plans and comp packages and the whole kind of scope of incentivizing bonuses, commissions, and all of that. And I decided as I was really thinking through, reflecting on why this is such uncomfortable and unknown territory for business owners, I started to think about this fundamental misunderstanding around the difference between motivation and incentivization. And so I think I want to really just talk with you guys a little bit about why I think we're messing up the whole getting employees motivated thing because we're jumping to the incentive before really understanding the motivation. Okay. Hope you're having an incredible summer. I can't believe we have like 2 weeks left. My kids are going back to school and I got to figure out if I want to just keep winging it on this podcast or start to put some more thought and energy into it. But anyway, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm actually recording them on video. So if you are listening to this and you haven't been heading to YouTube, you could watch this live, well, a recorded of the live stream version that I'm doing right now. So I'm thinking about a recent story about a physician that we worked with, Dr. Smith, we'll call him. And he had this front office coordinator. Her name is Lauren. And her primary responsibility was answering phones, scheduling appointments, like administrative tasks, all of the scheduling, coordinating, managing all of the to-dos in the business. He'd had her on board for a while. And then through this process had been working on investing in a private label skincare line. He gets the line launched and gets everything set up in the front desk, and come to find out, Lauren is not motivated to help sell the skincare line, right? That he's made this huge investment of time and energy and thought and all the things into to have his name on it, because Lauren feels like selling skincare is salesy. So Dr. Smith offers her a commission, and still, after weeks later, she still doesn't feel like she wants to sell. She still feels like selling skincare is salesy. And so, of course, Dr. Smith is frustrated. He sits down with her, explains to her that this is part of the job, but she still refuses, and then proceeds to tell him that, look, I didn't know that I was going to have to sell. That's not part of my job. That was never in my contract, right? So it became a point of contention. And I started to really think about, obviously, what the heck happened here? Why do we not have an employee who is motivated to sell, and how do we motivate her? I was just thinking about how frustrating it can be when we see something so clearly. We know we have a great product. We have so much to offer. We have an incredible opportunity for our patients to get great results with the skincare products, right, that we've created, but we don't have a team that's willing to open up and talk about them. What the heck is going on? And when I started to really think about, well, my first instinct was, well, Lauren's just not part of the team. Like, we go all in here, and sorry, Lauren, like, if you're not going to sell, then I don't know what to tell you. And then when I started to peel the onion back, this is me having my own internal dialogue, right? A little bit. I started to think about, from Dr. Smith's perspective, that she's a great employee doing all the other things. And he's trying to encourage her to want to sell products. But the truth is that she's not motivated because she doesn't like the feeling of selling, right? And so what can Dr. Smith do? Well, I think really understanding what her key drivers are and what would motivate her, right? Then he could create an incentive that would match that motivation driver. So for example, money, not something she's motivated by, clearly, right? And I think understanding the difference between selling and serving and the results of the patient and how she can help patients, right? There's a lot of complexity and opportunity to help shift Lauren's perspective so that she might want to sell products and she could become amazing, right? Maybe she's not educated. Maybe she needs something else. So I started to think about how this really example illustrates itself in so many situations, right? What we're doing here is we're confusing incentivization from motivation. So I want to kind of clear that up here today on this podcast. So first of all, an incentive is essentially something that is encouraging a person to do something or work harder, right? So I like to actually think of an incentive as a reward for someone achieving a result. Whereas motivation is the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. Okay, so motivation essentially is not something that's external. It is something that is intrinsic. It is something that already comes with somebody. The point is you can't really motivate a person. You can understand what is motivating to them and you can incentivize them in such a way. So I'll give an example. My cute little pugs, Oak and Bree, right? They're highly motivated by food and they will just automatically do whatever it takes to get the food. And so the incentive is a reward for something I asked them to do, and which would be chicken. Okay. Now, if Oak and Bree didn't like food, or for example, if I was trying to motivate them by providing the incentive of, let's say, a book, right? My dogs are not going to eat my homework. They want chicken, right? And so that is a mismatch in terms of a key driver of an employee and what motivates them. So the incentive and the motivation are not aligned. There was a recent survey that I came across by Nectar HR. It was an 800-person employee survey in which they uncovered that 83.6% of employees feel that recognition affects their motivation to succeed at work. So that's a whopping amount, right? 83.6%. And so I started to just dive into some of our own numbers in KLC. So something we do with one of our a la carte training services from a team building standpoint is we survey teams to find out what their love languages are. What is it that drives them and motivates them to want to do more at work? Okay. And what we found, so I'm going to go through a few examples. I pulled just some random surveys. A practice of 10 employees, the number one key driver, and we sort of gave them a breakdown of options. Money, recognition, vacation time, appreciation, quality time, learning, etc. The first case study, 10 employees, the number one was by far and large appreciation. The next case study of 13 employees, number one, appreciation. The next case study, 17 employees, number one, recognition. And finally, the last case study I pulled, 50 employees, the number one, recognition. And one of the very last ones was actually money. So I thought it was so interesting when I was thinking back to the experience with Dr. Smith and Lauren, right? How he immediately decided that if he paid her a commission, she should want to sell and she should want to make money and she should do it for that reason. But the reality is money is like so last year in the sense that long gone are the days where monetary bonuses and commissions are the best way to keep employees motivated. Instead, people have changed, core motivations have changed. And I think in general, we could blame or credit a global pandemic. We could credit just sort of a shift in personalities in Gen Zs, you name it, right? But the point is we have to really have clarity around our vision and enroll employees into that and understand what actually motivates them instead of just guessing or assuming that they're doing it all for the money. Okay. And so when you really understand and know your employee, it takes the headache and the guesswork out of this whole incentivization conversation. So here's a few of the common pitfalls that I see when it comes to incentivizing an employee. Number one, we automatically make hiring about the money. So I'll hear things like, well, I can't make an offer yet because I don't have a compensation plan figured out, or I'm not exactly sure how to pay that employee. And at the end of the day, the business hires an employee to produce a profit. And so those numbers and a range of what the business can afford should have already been determined before we even looked for the employee. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is that employee is probably coming into your business within a salary expectation in their mind already. Whether we can meet that or not, we need to know. So we need to understand what their expectations are and what motivates them, so we can create a compensation package that matches the human being to the results that we're looking to achieve in the role. The second pitfall that I see is that we overpay upfront. So we get so excited that this new employee is coming in. We want to make sure that we snag them before they go somewhere else and they have all this experience. And so we load them up with as much as we can afford to pay them right out of the gate. And then what happens? Then we don't have as much room for growth potential. Whereas when we're looking to hire entrepreneurs, we want to find people that are looking for upward mobility, in which case we want to give ourselves room to be able to pay for those incentives, be it maybe it's a cash reward or maybe it's something else, or to afford those things when we are trying to get them or trying to help them find their pathway for upward mobility within the company. And then the final pitfall is that we just assume that money will motivate an employee. So we automatically in our mind go into the hiring process and the negotiation around compensation all about the money. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes about how to avoid that. But please keep in mind that, remember when I illustrated for you not only the Nectar study, but our internal studies. By far and large, human beings want to be appreciated and recognized. And so before any of that, I would be thinking about, how am I incorporating that into the way that I reward my employee in this company? So I'm going to talk to you about 3 best practices for incentivizing employees. Number 1 is hiring intrapreneurs. Number 2 is learning their key drivers. And number 3 is differentiating your offer. Okay, so I'm going to go into those in a little bit of detail. Number 1, hiring intrapreneurs. You guys have heard me say this time and time again, right? Fundamental difference here between an employee and an entrepreneur. An employee is checking boxes, clocking in and out, working for a paycheck, needs to be micromanaged. An entrepreneur is essentially almost like an entrepreneur in their own role. They want to own the role. They're talent acquisition. They're seeking growth and upward mobility in your company. They want to put their fingerprint on the mission of the company. They're aligned with you on the vision. It's very different. Usually entrepreneurs are not somebody that has to be micromanaged all the time. They're proactive. They're a part of the solution, right? Not a part of the problem. It's a whole different fundamental mindset shift here. And so when we hire employees and then we want them to act like entrepreneurs, we're essentially trying to change them and turn them into something that they're innately not. Okay. So when we talk about motivation being intrinsic and somebody being motivated, a motivated human, right? That comes when you hire. That comes before we select that employee. We're picking somebody, choosing someone to come onto our team who wants to be an entrepreneur for our team. So I always like to say you can hire for ambition or passion, these intrinsic characteristics. And when you find these people, you can teach them how to do the things, right? Then the skill piece is easy. The rest sort of falls into place. But when you hire for the things, you can't teach them how to get excited about doing them. Number 2, best practice is to learn key drivers. This is essentially understanding what it is that motivates your employee. My pugs are motivated by food. Okay. If I gave them money, they would not be motivated to do just about anything. Okay. So we want to understand. So you could do things like work with our company to run a love language survey and learn more about your employees and check in with your employees and get to know what motivates them. Or you can ask them, you could simply ask them, hey, tell me a little bit more about what drives you. What are your goals? What are you looking to accomplish in the next several years, right? Like what's really inside gets them excited. And then finally, number 3 is to differentiate and customize your offer. here's where the whole comp plan versus comp package thing comes into play. Okay. So most of the time, what I see practice owners do is they decide what hourly amount, or even if it's a salaried employee, maybe what that hourly or annual compensation would be. And it's a standard pay rate, right? And then maybe some vacation, whatever, according to the policies. But we recommend instead is to create a compensation package that would include some aspects of this employee's key drivers. So it could be salary, could be bonuses based on delivery of very specific results. It could be training, conferences, benefits, paid time off. Maybe there's other perks that are important for them, aesthetic treatments, virtual or part-time work, or flexibility. And so there's a value to all of these things. So we have employers we work with that paying a provider, let's say, a very lucrative salary plus a bonus at the end of the year based on results. And they're spending tens of thousands of dollars a year on training, mentorship, and conferences. Those should be included in the total package so that the employee can see when they are looking for a place of employment, they can really understand and buy into the value of what that opportunity is for them, right? And also, if we're hiring entrepreneurs, we need to help them understand that the company does have expenses, right? Those aren't just things that come out of thin air that they get. So a lot of times you guys will say like, I'm so tired of having an entitled employee around. Well, this is how we gauge that. And we funnel and filter these employees out to make sure that they are understand and appreciative and grateful for the expenses that the company is making on their behalf. So when we talk about like these key drivers, there's something that I like to call the 5 business love languages. So just like you would in your relationship, in your marriage, right? Like maybe you have a love language. So I think mine's probably aspects of all of them, but definitely I would say words of affirmation is probably my number one. So these love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and cash. We actually run this exercise within our company to understand not only what is your love language, how can we speak to you and meet you on that level, but also some examples of then what you can do with that, right? So if it's acts of service, like we'll give you a list of examples of things that you can do to help that employee with some of their tasks or to do something that's going to make their life easier, right? I would say as we talk about incentivization and we talk about like motivating employees and wanting to incentivize them, remember that the reason we incentivize is that we want them to go above and beyond. And their reason for wanting to go above and beyond may not be the same reason for you. I think the biggest thing is focusing on mindfulness leadership, right? The little things sometimes are the biggest things. Recently, my husband, for his little all-star baseball team, wrote little handwritten notes to each of the players to tell them what a great job they did at the end of the year. And I can tell you, so many parents sent pictures and thank you notes to him about what an impact that made for these little ball players, right? It was very inexpensive, not a big deal. Just took some time and some thoughtfulness to sit down and write that thank you note. And I think sometimes we forget how special that is, right? Especially if we're busy business owners and we have hard time even making time for our employees as much as they deserve. Those little things probably could be monumental in terms of establishing greater trust and loyalty and relationship with them. So some great best practices from our Academy members are rewarding or recognizing rather an employee of the month, just sending some flowers, sometimes randomly for something special, thank you notes, surprises, special recognition, paid time off, consistent feedback, believe it or not, leader, that's huge. Team dinners, training programs, aesthetic treatments, these are a few of them. The biggest takeaway is that when you're thinking about how to incentivize an employee, first start by hiring entrepreneurs who are motivated, who are intrinsically motivated because they care about the fingerprint they leave on the world. They want to do better. They want to be recognized for the great work that they do. Number 2, learn their key drivers, know what motivates them. And then finally, differentiate your offer and show up and do the things, the little things, the mindful things that are going to separate you from somebody else who's just pumping a big paycheck down their throat which of course, I'm not advocating against a great paycheck. Pay your people well. That is like baseline, right? Pay them what they're worth. And understand though, that you cannot use incentivization as a motivation tool. The motivation already comes with that employee. And then finally, create incentive plans that align the needs of the company with that specific employee, that human being, right? And stop making it so freaking transactional, okay? All right. I actually have a really great resource for you guys. So if you are listening to this, we have a freebie, and it is a guide called the Employee Love Language Survey. And this is just a basic sort of free version of the big survey that we run for our practices. You can access that at klcconsultants.com/employee love. The first page will be a survey you can print out and give to your employees. And the second page will be a list of examples of ways to recognize and incentivize employees based on their love languages. So make sure you check that out. A nice little freebie for you. And I want to thank you so much for being such an incredible listener. If this was helpful for you, go leave a review for us on the Fierce Factor podcast. Give us 5 stars, share, and show some love back in return. Okay, happy summer again. And I will talk with you same place, same time next week. Wait, before you go, if you're vibing with this conversation and want to join me on my mission to help 1,000 inspiring and intentional women cross the next $1 million milestone in their business this year, or maybe you want to become one of them, head over to Facebook and join our free community, the Fierce Factor Society. Over there, we are taking this conversation to an elevated level. Get access to resource guides, podcast supplements, and guideposts, direct communication with me and my expert team, and of course, a society of fierce women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to Facebook and search up the Fierce Factor Society. See you there, goddess.